You ever have something from years ago just suddenly click? Welcome back to the Lost Cause Ranch. Last week we started the process of putting our rare Callaway Land Rover engine into our even more rare Eco Challenge Discovery. Yes, that Eco Challenge Discovery. Well, as you can see, there is an engine back in there, but let's just say it's not exactly the outcome we were looking for. Where we're headed, we aren't gonna need this guy. So that little pedestal there is the transfer case shift mount. That guy just sits right on top there. We're just gonna get that guy off there. It's gonna be one less obstacle for when we pull the engine and transmission out together. Just a little less height, so we have a little more clearance with transmission tunnel and the firewall. We also have the transfer case unbolted from the back of the transmission. And this automatic shifter, that can go in the trash. Remember last time when I said I probably should have pulled the bumper off? Well, probably should have pulled the bumper off. The old RTE with the winch is not the lightest thing in the world, so we're gonna swing it out with the engine hoist. We can get in a tiny bit better position now. We just gotta get a little more tilt going on though. Good thing I bought like 30 of these load levelers a little bit ago. We're in frickin' business now. Look at the amount of crud on this guy. I would say that's like 220,000 miles worth of crud, but I'm willing to bet that's been fixed a couple times in its life. All right, we are clear of the firewall now. We could have pulled the transfer case out with it, but this worked out nicely as well. A little less bulk to deal in on the rear. If you're gonna pull the engine and leave the transmission in, these are your fun ones to get off. The firewall's a little bit in the way. If you jack them up, pull the engine mounts out, and then lower the engine back down, you get a little more clearance for those. It's also really fun getting the torque converter bolts out. So this worked. But once again, similar to the bumper situation, I may have put myself in a little bit of a pickle. I should have choked down tighter. That's as high as it goes, so see if we can level it out some. Unfortunately, I'm not really that tall. All right, so I think we got something rigged up that is gonna work. A little ratchet strap to pull this side of the engine up a little bit, and we're clear. Now we're just gonna get all the way in the engine bay. Yeah, now that we got some room. But we're just gonna get the transfer case out of there now, and to do that, we need to get the drive shaft off. All right, now I just gotta get back out of here. I lost the glove. Oh, there it is. We officially have everything out that needs to be out of there. That's a little bit of a process. I think we'll pull it out. I was gonna try and push it out. You know, I don't know what I'd do without the winch on the front of the LR4. We're gonna have to build a winch setup for that guy too. This is just far too handy. So we're just gonna go ahead and plug up all our open lines because there's gonna be no time better than the present to get this guy cleaned up. There's like 30 years of grime and a ton of red dirt on this thing. We got a lot less grease going on in there. Nice to give it a thorough bath. This guy's seen enough stuff that it's never gonna be perfect without paint, but that's really not the purpose of the Eco. The Eco is here to get used and have fun with. I just wanted to get all the grease out of the way and get it cleaned up as much as possible while we had the engine out. We're also gonna clean this guy up a bit because this guy is like 3 times as heavy as it should be. So there's a lot of crud just around. And these D1 radiators are kind of pricey to replace. I don't know if the camera's gonna be able to pick it up, but these bottom rows are just packed, dang near full of crud. This guy was overall generally just pretty dirty, so that probably wasn't helping in the cooling department. Like I mentioned a few times over the past, this guy did seem to get warmer quicker than it should. Part of that was in certain scenarios, it was down on power, so you had to run it pretty freaking hard. A lot more throttle and RPM than should have been necessary. Second, if these guys are full and the fins are way dirty, it's not going to transfer the heat from the coolant to the air. So hopefully we'll be in much better shape after this. Now you just got to be pretty careful if you're using a pressure washer on something like this. This guy is our electric setup, and this guy was spec'd out for washing cars at our dealership. So it only has 1,000 PSI of pressure, so it's not like your gas powered ones with like 3,500 PSI. You do that, you're gonna fold those fins over. And if you fold all these fins over, that kind of defeats the purpose of cleaning them out because it'll be worse than it was before, not allowing air through. Now we get the fun job of cleaning up all the stuff we gotta swap over. We'll let that guy go for a bath for a bit. The last thing we got to grab off this motor before we throw it outside are the manifolds. I wish we could run the P38 ones, but they just don't clear the firewall with how they come out of the back of the motor. They also end up being a little too wide for the frame rails. I just think these are a much better design, but that's all right because after we prove out this working with the swap, with the manual swap, we're gonna get some headers, something like this, and build out a complete exhaust for the Eco. Being we're leaving for Utah in about a week, we just don't have time to do that at the moment. None of these were even tight at all. Well, this side's tighter so far. Look at all that red clay on those guys. Dip these guys in the parts cleaner. We got everything cleaned up, or at least as much as we can. That red clay dirt is pretty well baked on some of this stuff, but that's all right because those will only be on here temporarily. But now we got to do a little swapping. When we put the Callaway engine together, we didn't know exactly where it was going to go, so I kept the shorter P38 timing cover, but we need to swap it back over. And while we're in here, we're going to pop a new oil pump gear in. We're going to make sure we keep the Callaway engine alive. We're going to pack this guy full of Vaseline. We'll build pressure faster with the Vaseline packed in there. The old gear wasn't too bad, just a little bit of scoring on it. And being we're changing that front cover, we also got to change the oil pan, mainly because of the pickup. On the P38, the pickup goes into the back of the oil pump housing. The Discovery one does not have that. It's a flat plate on the back of the oil pump. It picks up the oil from this port here, which runs through the block to right there. We stuck the Discovery pickup in the ultrasonic cleaner, got it all cleaned out, but you can see, and that is some garbage. Glad we got that cleaned out. I think other than that, we're pretty good. Looks like some either built up carbon or possibly some old silicone. You do have to be careful with the amount of silicone you put on your sealing surfaces. You put too much, it squeezes out, goes to the bottom of the pan, ends up in the pickup, which chokes the oil going to the rest of the engine. We can't use the P38 bolts. That makes sense. You know, being this is like an inch longer, makes sense. So I think I'm gonna leave the water pump off until we get it in the car. Pretty sure we're gonna try and swing everything in, transfer case and all. So another 4 inches of clearance up front without the water pump and the crank pulley on will hopefully make my life a tiny bit easier. And for reference, even the crank pulley is quite a bit different. P38, D1. Look at the dish. So we're gonna get this guy sealed up for the last time. And being we have this guy laid on its side, I think we'll zip our manifold off. Really wish we could run these. And we gotta swap out our engine mount bracket. These guys are quite a bit different as well. Now we can slip our exhaust manifold on. Kind of disappointing. These don't look quite as nice as those. We'll change them in the future though. Got our starter and heat shield into place as well. We'll just spin this guy back. Now we're ready to rock and roll. So for reference, so far to swap over from P38 setup to a D1, we needed front cover, oil pan and pickup, engine mount brackets, along with switching back over to the Discovery manifolds because those come out more in the center of the engine and tighter to the block. The P38 ones are just too wide and they'd run into the firewall right on either side of the transmission tunnel. And we got to run into the storage container to grab one of the other pieces to make this puzzle work. Now this was one of the early pieces to go into the container, so hopefully we can get it back out without too much of an issue. I'm guessing we're gonna have to do some rearranging. Yeah, it's not gonna fit. All right, so we're a little better positioned. I'm sure this is gonna go well. Probably get it all the way over here and dump it. That'd be the way I roll. And we got to go to another storage place, and that is inside another Discovery. The best place to store Land Rover parts, inside Land Rovers. But I think we need this box. Now we just need to find the most important parts, which should be mixed in here somewhere. This thing is pretty roached out, but I think we'll bring that to Utah. Always good to have a spare. And I believe in here is what we're after. Maybe. Nope. That's Defender. Now this is what we're after. That right there is crucial. The Eco is missing something over here, but the Risco Disco is coming in clutch. Now one would think we got the engine ready, got our pedals, and have our R380 where we get all the control. So we should just be able to throw everything together and toss it in. Well, that's incorrect. In theory, that would work, but some guy forgot something back here. We have our new clutch, our master cylinder, slave cylinder. We should just be good to go. Well, I forgot we're doing a manual swap. Kind of forgot that we need our pilot bushing to go on the back of the crank for our input shaft to ride on. The Callaway was obviously an automatic, so it does not have that in there. So we are at a bit of an impasse. So I guess I'll get everything cleaned up for the time being while we get that situation sorted out. You would not believe it, but we have another delivery at the car wash. I am pretty stoked. That stuff is just showing up without me having to intervene like I've had to pretty much every package up until the last couple weeks. But we went ahead and placed an order with Lucky 8, and they were able to get our stuff here in a super quick fashion. These guys always come in clutch to save my butt, and with my absent mind, there is always some last minute stuff needed. But right there is the guy we were looking for. But while we were ordering stuff, I figured new radiator hose and a couple other things would come in handy. But this guy slips inside the end of the crankshaft there, and then the input shaft fits inside that, and everything's happy. Well, everything's not gonna be happy. You ever have something from years ago just suddenly click? Well, that just happened, and it's really gonna screw stuff up. So just getting everything ready to go to put the flywheel on the backside of the Callaway engine, and I flip the flywheel over. Houston, we have a problem. See, I knew this was a problem years ago when we ripped the Risco Disco apart, but I put it off because it wasn't a current problem. Does anyone see the issue? The Risco Disco was a 1995 Land Rover with a 3.9 and a distributor. So therefore, it didn't have one of these. And this is the crankshaft sensor that sits on the back of the engine right there. And that crankshaft sensor uses this tone ring to figure out when to fire everything off in the engine. The 95, which isn't a GEMS motor, doesn't have that. All we need is a 96 and newer flywheel from a manual Discovery. The issue there lies in the fact that we're leaving for Moab in a week from today. And most of those flywheels are across the pond in Europe, so that just ain't frickin' happening. But not only is the time an issue, we now have an issue because, as most of you know, we have a tariff situation going on. So therefore, this $1,000 used flywheel that are kind of a bit rare is gonna be walloped in tariffs if it can even be shipped here. A lot of countries are no longer shipping to the US at the moment, so we're in a predicament. So I guess what I'm saying is if any of you have a manual 96, 97 GEMS flywheel, something that looks like this with the tone ring on the back instead of this, which is smooth, I'd love to buy it off you. But I guess that means we're calling another audible. Time for this to go back on, and I guess it's a good thing we haven't thrown this away yet. So we're gonna do a big reversal of what we just did. Get a little thread lock back on the bolts on this. Essentially, we just went ahead and did a very thorough cleaning. Would have been much easier to just leave the transmission in place and just do the Callaway engine for now, but I guess it is what it is. It's a little trickier when it's just hanging from a chain swinging around, but we're gonna make do. So we set the torque converter back in the transmission. Easiest way to do this is to have the transmission standing vertical. Second easiest way is to make sure the front is up a little bit. So we got our block of wood and we slid it in. These are a little bit tricky sometimes, getting them indexed all the way in. They'll kind of make like 3 or 4 little clicks into place. But before we bolt the transmission to the engine, we're gonna make sure that we have it all the way in. The way I do this is take a measurement from the torque converter to the face of the transmission and then go across the drive plate. If you don't have this seated all the way in, you run the risk of breaking the front pump, which we definitely can't afford to do at this point. After this, we're kind of out of transmissions that'll work. Probably should have grabbed bolts. Son of a gun. Get the angle matched here. All right, we're close. We're gonna get one started just so it doesn't roll away on me. Now we can use the leveler to close our gap up. So it's a little bit of a bummer, but the automatic transmission and original transfer case is stuck on there, and we're all cleared out, ready to go back in. I will say though, this is just such a motivation killer. I was so excited to have the 5-speed in the Eco. And at least everything will be clean this time around, and plopping this guy out the bottom to get this guy in won't be such a big deal. I choked down on the chain a little bit, cross members out of the way. We should have a clear runway to swing this guy in. It got pretty warm out the last couple days, so we're in here sweating again. I think on next year's list, we're gonna add air conditioning to the car wash. Transfer case hangs a little bit lower. That's all we got. All right, we'll see if we can make this happen. We're getting close. So this hasn't been all that bad to slide everything in together. We don't even have it set up on the hoist. We're just using a jack underneath to kind of walk the transfer case in to where it needs to end up. This is where it's gonna get a little bit trickier, getting it lined up exactly where we need to be. This grate on the floor really doesn't help anything out, to tell you the truth. Hit it the right way, Joe, and it works better. We're just getting that so it can slide back a little bit further. We also got a whole new set of fresh mounts. This thing's gonna be solid. We're gonna slip these guys in. I'll have to lift this up a hair. Drop that on the ground because that's good for it. Now this is gonna be a little bit of a song and dance here. So getting both sides to drop into the frame mount, which is slotted, can be a little bit tricky. You gotta have the whole engine kind of sitting correctly. And with the way I have it set up now, we gotta lower it down and slide it back, and they should drop right in. Now normally you kind of do this with two people, but here we are. They go up just a touch. So we got both engine mounts sitting in place now. We can work on the rear now. The transfer case mount was obviously in good shape. In the eye. Probably would be wearing glasses. Doesn't make too much sense though. See if it stays in place. By golly, it's hanging out on its own. That means we should be able to drop the front too. Wow. See how much it squatted the Eco back down? It's not quite a lightweight anymore. We can roll this guy out of the way. So much room to play around again. So we're just starting to rough out the wiring here, get that all set into place. But I just wanted to point out another neat little difference. So we got the little velocity stacks on the inside of the plenum for the intake. These are the Callaway ones. And just look at that difference in height compared to the 4-liter ones. Shortening the runner length typically moves the power band up. So the Eco is now gonna be a high RPM rocket. You know, as much as an old Buick motor can be. Now that is what I would call an awesome sight. We're just about ready to rock and roll. So we're gonna finish connecting everything back on there. It is currently Sunday afternoon. So if you are watching this as it goes up live, I'm only a few hours behind you right now. We have 6 days until we make our 20-hour trip to Moab. Hopefully with this guy. But I just wanted to keep you updated on the Eco Challenge. It kind of turned into not exactly what we wanted to happen. But either way, finally having that sweet little Callaway engine with like 60 more horsepower is gonna be what we need for a little Moab redemption, I believe. So tune in next week where we'll see if this guy's going. And we also need to do a little work to this guy because that's what's gonna be pulling the Eco out there. But either way, appreciate you guys watching, appreciate you subscribing, and we will catch you next week where hopefully the 405 is towing our working Hot Rod Eco Challenge out to the National Rally. And I almost forgot, the actual rod knock fix showed up today. We got a couple high flow cats to replace those old guys. You know, it's kind of comical. This whole project could have been avoided had I just put these in. Seems about right.